The sun had barely touched the horizon when Luke Mather saw something thrashing in the San Pedro River, not the usual shimmer of trout or the driftwood he'd seen 1,000 times before, but a human figure, massive and struggling against the current. He was out gathering driftwood for his small fire, still nursing a broken heart and a limp that never quite healed from a ranch accident 3 winters ago. Life had taken nearly everything from him: his land, his horse, and the woman who'd promised to wait for him but married another when he was bedridden. Luke had learned to keep his eyes down, to avoid the troubles of others. But that morning, when he saw the strong, desperate arms of someone drowning, something in him, maybe the last living piece of courage, woke up again. Without thinking, he dropped his hat and boots, plunged into the icy current, and fought toward the figure. It wasn't until he reached her that he realized she was not just any woman. She was enormous, easily a head taller than most men, her body built with the raw strength of someone born under the open sky. Her dark braids floated like serpents in the current, her skin painted with fading tribal marks that told him she was Apache. She fought him at first, threshing, fearing he was an enemy. But Luke shouted over the roaring water, "I ain't here to hurt you. You're gonna drown." He grabbed her by the arm, and with every ounce of strength left in his battered body, he pulled her toward the bank. It took forever, every muscle in him burnt, and the current slammed him against rocks, but somehow, they collapsed in the mud, gasping. The woman rolled over, coughing up water, her enormous chest heaving, and when she finally opened her eyes, they were like black fire, wahre, proud, alive. She looked at him for a long moment and said in a deep, shaky voice, "Why?" He didn't have an answer that made sense. "Because you were drowning," he said simply, and she stared at him like she couldn't decide whether to thank him or strike him. He helped her sit up, tore off a piece of his own shirt to bandage the cut on her shoulder, and built a small fire to warm her. She watched his every move in silence, studying him with the quiet suspicion of someone who'd learned the world gives kindness with a hidden blade. "You're Apache," he finally said, handing her a tin cup of warm water. She nodded once. "Namas Nadahi, Shesait," her voice softening slightly. "It means, the one who fights." He smiled faintly. "Fitting." She studied him too, this thin, worn-down cowboy with eyes too kind for his own good. When he reached out to offer her more water, she noticed his trembling hands and the scars along his wrists, old wounds that told stories of struggle and survival. "You saved me," she said quietly, as if testing the words. "I just couldn't watch someone die," he replied, his tone more tired than heroic. The night settled over the riverbank, and the fire's glow painted her strong features in gold. She told him fragments of her story, that she'd been crossing the river to find her younger brother, taken by bounty hunters near Tombstone. She'd fallen from her horse when a storm rose suddenly, the river swollen and violent. "I thought maybe the spirits wanted to end me," she whispered, "but you pulled me back." Luke poked at the fire, unsure what to say. "Maybe they just wanted you to meet someone first." She looked at him, and for the first time, she smiled, a rare, radiant, powerful smile that made him forget the ache in his bones. The next morning, Luke woke to the sound of hoofs. At first, he thought it was a dream, but when he looked up, his breath caught. There were at least 70 riders coming down the ridge, Apache warriors, painted and armed, their horses snorting clouds into the morning air. At their head rode an older man, tall and proud, with silver hair braided down his back and the weight of command in his every movement. Nadahi stood beside Luke, calm but tense. "My father," she said quietly. Luke's heart skipped. He didn't know whether to run or bow. The older man dismounted and approached them slowly, his gaze like steel. "Who is this?" he asked in Apache, and Nadahi answered, her voice low but clear. She told her father everything, how Luke had risked his life to save hers, how he treated her wounds, how he had shown her kindness without asking anything in return. The father's eyes softened slightly, but his tone remained firm. He turned to Luke and spoke in accented English, "You saved my daughter. For that, you will have a reward." Luke shook his head immediately. "No, sir," he said, standing, trying to keep his voice steady. "I did do it for that." The chief frowned. "In our way, honor must be balanced. A life saved is a debt." Luke tried to explain that he didn't want payment, that he'd done what any man should do, but the old man didn't seem used to being refused. He gestured, and 2 warriors brought forward a horse, the most magnificent animal Luke had ever seen. Jet black, muscles rippling under its coat, with feathers braided into its mane. "This is Tsne," said the chief. "He carried me into battle when I was young. Now he will carry you." Luke's voice cracked. "Tsue. I can't take that." The chief's stern face softened, and he placed a heavy hand on Luke's shoulder. "You gave me back my daughter. I give you back your strength." For a long moment, Luke couldn't speak. He'd lost his old horse years ago. It had been his last friend, his last tie to a life before everything fell apart. Now, this stranger, this proud father whose people had every reason to distrust men like him, was giving him something priceless. He looked at Nadahi, who nodded, her dark eyes shining with gratitude. "Take it," she whispered. "It's the spirit's way." That night, around a fire shared between two worlds, the Apaches and the cowboy broke bread. Nadahi sang softly in her language a song of rivers and redemption, and Luke listened, feeling something heal deep inside him. When the chief stood, he raised his hand and said, "This man is a friend of the Apache." The warriors bowed their heads in respect. Luke didn't know what to do except tip his hat, embarrassed and overwhelmed. But Nadahi stepped forward, pressed her palm to his chest, and said, "You pulled me from death. Now, live again." Over the following days, as the tribe prepared to move on, Nadahi stayed by Luke's side. She helped him relearn how to write without pain, taught him the names of the stars, and laughed at his clumsy attempts to speak her language. For the first time in years, Luke found himself looking forward to morning. The nightmares that had haunted him, of loss, of loneliness, began to fade. He told her stories of his mother's Bible and his father's ranch, and she listened with the same reverence she gave her people's legends. They were from different worlds, yet somehow they fit two souls who had known pain, finding light in each other's company. When the time came for her to leave, Luke stood by the river, the same place he'd pulled her from the water. "You'll go find your brother?" he asked. She nodded. "And you?" He smiled faintly. "I'll try to live like I deserve that horse." She reached out, her massive hand enveloping his, and whispered, "The river brought us together. Maybe it will again." Then she mounted her horse and rode away, her figure disappearing into the red dust of dawn. Luke stood there long after she vanished, the wind carrying her song faintly across the plains. Months passed. Luke rebuilt his ranch, this time not for wealth or pride, but to give wild horses a home. He named it Spirit's Crossing. Every morning, he'd ride Tsne down to the river, half hoping, half praying he might see her again. Some days, he thought he heard distant drums in the canyon. Some nights, he'd see a fire glowing on the horizon and imagine her singing by et, and every time the wind rustled through the cottonwoods, it whispered the same thing, that kindness never dies, it only circles back. Then, one evening, as he was closing the gate, he saw a figure approaching on horseback. At first, he thought it was just a traveler. But as the sun dipped low, he recognized the silhouette, tall, proud, her braids glinting with silver in the light. Nadahi. She dismounted silently, her smile soft but sure. "I found my brother," she said. "He is safe." Luke felt his chest tighten with joy. "And what brings you here?" he asked quietly. She stepped closer. "The river told me you were still waiting." He laughed softly. "I guess I was." Under that same sky where they first met, the cowboy and the Apache woman stood together again, two hearts bound not by blood or tribe, but by something deeper. She reached up, touching his scarred face, and said, "The spirits give no gifts without reason. You pulled me from the river, but maybe, Luke, I was sent to pull you from your sorrow." He swallowed hard, his voice thick. "You already did." From that night on, they shared their lives between two worlds, her people and his land, their differences melting into something beautiful. The ranch flourished, children laughed along the river, and sometimes, when travelers passed through, they'd tell stories of the white cowboy and the giant Apache woman who built a home where enemies once stood. And if you stood by that river long enough, you'd swear you could still hear it, the echo of her laughter and his quiet voice saying, "Because you were drowning," reminding every soul that kindness, the simple act of reaching out, can change not just one life, but generations to come.